What are you doing here today?
Is this some kind of setup or something?
What do you mean?
I'm just on my way to the beach.
And how did you
Make a bad video.
Well, of course online.
You act like I should know that.
What? No way.
You know, I have the
Video.
So I was at work today, doing my normal work duties of watching YouTube while pretending to be working on a spreadsheet, when I came across a video called Bad Media Criticism. It's by a YouTuber named Sarah Z, who for the most part makes videos I enjoy. Honestly, I haven't seen a ton of her stuff, but she seems to make fine videos. But Sarah's criticism of bad media criticism is filled with mostly pretty weak criticism. Basically, what Sarah tries to suggest in this poorly researched video is that there's good and bad faith criticism, which is fair from an opinion standpoint. However, she argues this point by criticizing several genres of criticism at large, as well as smaller videos, but really doesn't bother to define good or bad faith criticism, ultimately just picking and choosing who falls into these categories with little examination of their actual character. So let's talk about it.
I love it when you call me Big Papa. Throw your hands in the air if you's a true player.
Before I talk about Sarah's thesis, I will create my own thesis. There's no such thing as bad faith criticism, if it is done with your actual opinion. And by this I mean, if I get paid to say something is good that I don't think is good, that is bad faith criticism. If I hate something because of an agenda and not because of the actual content, that's bad faith criticism. However, outside of a few exceptions, even if an opinion, which may be seen as a subjectively bad opinion, if made from a genuine place, is still an opinion made within good faith. In Sarah's video, she didn't bother to define criticism in good faith or criticism in bad faith, so we don't really have a basis as to what she meant by good or bad faith criticism. But I think my definition is fair. The closest she comes to this is when she tries to define bad faith criticism as, in her words,
media criticism that literally does not care about whether the core of a movie or show is good or bad and only focuses on inconsequential details isn't particularly useful. And this is more likely to happen when you've built a niche around creating a negative review of whatever's popular at the time.
Good faith criticism is something she fails to define, so I guess what she means is, it is in bad faith if it comes from someone whose opinion she doesn't like, which is a bias she pretty clearly portrays throughout the video.
The line between what the character thinks and what the creator thinks became a lot more blurred until you got a sort of review style that was just an angry guy sharing his genuine negative opinions about media, but like with a lot of screaming and swearing. And this review style, angry man screams about how terrible things are, did dominate YouTube for a long time. That's not to say that channels based on thoughtful critiques of various forms of media didn't exist. You did have some similar channels who were affiliated with Channel Awesome that made analytical content. I mean, Lindsay Ellis started making videos in 2008, albeit not remotely at the same analytical level as her videos today.
She starts the video off by talking about the rise in channels making YouTube criticism, starting with channels she likes, including herself, which she basically defines as good faith criticism, and defines channels like Nostalgia Critic, CinemaSins, and a blanket statement of long-form video reviews as doing more harm than good. So I guess this is our thesis. I think from the start we can wonder what makes her favorite channels in good faith, while people like Nostalgia Critic, CinemaSins, or long-form reviewers essentially in bad faith, a statement she backs up by blatantly calling them bad faith pretty soon after her initial thesis.
Sadly, a lot of what passes itself off as good faith media criticism is not. In particular, content like CinemaSins, The Nostalgia Critic, and more recently, a lot of multi-hour video essays dedicated to dissecting certain shows end up doing more harm than they do good.
She then goes into how some of her own videos may even fall into the category of bad faith. This is a technique we call dodging criticism. It was a nice try, but despite her fairly good reception on this video still has a fair amount that can be criticized in and of itself.
Angry man screams about how terrible things are.
Anyhow, she talks about how James Rolfe, for the angry video game nerd, was probably the first major player in the angry reviewer genre, a genre that obviously lives on to this day. She says people like him and Doug Walker, or the Nostalgia Critic, were early pioneers in this genre who started out as characters but eventually merged with the real men who created them. The implication is that early on, Doug and James didn't actually share their opinions with the characters they portray, but slowly their actual opinions began to fuse in with the characters, making them indistinguishable.
But this is just factually incorrect.
The issue with this idea is that I don't think if you asked James if he actually liked the Jekyll and Hyde game for NES, one of his earliest reviews, he would legitimately say he enjoyed it. In fact, there are several examples of James out of character criticizing this very game.
How would you put it? I say it's flawed and terrible.
You can't. Words don't describe it. You can't.
I guess that's why we're doing another fucking video about it, because you've already done 2 videos, but
like
you haven't said enough about it because words can't describe it.
Yeah,
so
but
there could
really,
just be endless videos about it.
Yeah, you can't. There's no words to describe.
And I hate that I can't get by this fucking spider.
This is the tactic he still uses to this day. While it may be a bit played down compared to the early days, it is still very clearly the idea of his show from the start. When talking about Doug Walker or the Nostalgia Critic, she talks about the fact that he is also merged with his character and points out that one of his character reviews is very similar to the opinion he displays in an out-of-character, unscripted first viewing episode, which is a companion series to the Nostalgia Critic, which essentially goes behind the scenes on how Doug and Rob Walker watch a film and ultimately write the series.
The idea with channels like CinemaSins, as well as Nostalgia Critic and similar channels, is that these aren't the real opinions of these people. They're playing characters who are these annoying guys who nitpick small details. You see, they tell you, you're not really supposed to like them or empathize with them. This is dishonest. Part of the problem here is that we know for a fact that some of these criticisms these channels put out really are the genuine thoughts of their creators. Channels like CinemaSins and the Nostalgia Critic also do out-of-character reviews where they just talk about the movies they saw normally, and oftentimes the out-of-character criticisms and the in-character criticisms are the same.
Sherman from Peabody and Sherman had a sex change. So young.
Did you have a feeling? I had a feeling.
I don't know.
Samvira comes home to her daughter, who is presumably Sherman, after he got a sex change. Which, let's be honest, we all saw that coming.
Again, it's like the movement of this guy could be funny. It's like they're onto something, but they're not talented.
His career is on the rise. Let's see if we can put a stop to that by casting him as someone who's supposed to move funny, but instead moves like a sped-up inflatable outside of a car rental.
This would be a completely fair criticism, except it's actually not. While Nostalgia Critic is a character, much like the angry video game nerd, it is still Doug's opinion. He just plays them out dramatically as the Nostalgia Critic character, and while I often criticize Doug on my own channel, it is inaccurate to say in his old reviews he would make criticisms sheerly for satire, while now he infuses his criticism with satire, because Doug has stayed pretty consistent with the standards in which he makes his reviews and how he does them. If his views within his videos were ever fully satire, I suppose you could categorize his opinions within bad faith, but that really isn't the case. What Doug does is takes actual opinions and infuses them with jokes.
So while we initially got these reviewers deliberately playing these easily angered characters who you were clearly not supposed to agree with, the line between what the character thinks and what the creator thinks became a lot more blurred until you got a sort of review style that was just an angry guy sharing his genuine negative opinions about media, but like with a lot of screaming and swearing.
Apparently saying their own opinion with swearing makes the review in bad faith. I guess, but she doesn't really explain why this is the case. The reason I can't really grasp onto her argument stems from the fact that historically we've seen people infuse satire with legitimate criticism. Is a political cartoon criticizing a politician in bad faith just because it infuses humor? Sarah has this little rant in the middle where she says big channels have to chase trends, which is problematic because angry reviewers like Nostalgia Critic or CinemaSins will be forced to talk about these films and give them negative reviews because of their brand. But that's not really the case. In Doug's Ghostbusters 2016 review, a film that was almost universally panned, he said he somewhat enjoyed the film, despite making jokes about it.
I can also see how someone can enjoy it. The performers are great, there are some really funny jokes, and it can be really creative. For me, I like it the most when it's doing its own thing, and it doesn't need to call back to the original. But not everybody's gonna see it that way, and that's fine. Ghostbusters is gonna be something unique and different to everybody, because everybody has their own unique experience to it. So if you wanna go see it, go see it. If you don't wanna go see it, don't go see it. As long as your decision is yours, and you're not bullied by anybody into doing something you don't want to do, or think what you don't want to think.
The idea with channels like CinemaSins, as well as Nostalgia Critic and similar channels, is that these aren't the real opinions of these people. They're playing characters who are these annoying guys who nitpick small details.
In his review of Suicide Squad, another film nearly universally panned, he cracked jokes about the film and did skits about the film, but also went on to say he mostly enjoyed it.
It's got a lot of dumb, boring moments, but the badass moments are enough for me to say, I'm glad I saw it.
These aren't the real opinions of these people.
Well, that's kind of awkward. It's almost like when Doug doesn't cherry pick movies to review negatively for his angry review character, he actually has the ability to like what he watches. The problem doesn't seem that Doug is predisposed to dislike films, rather, the problem seems to be that Sarah is predisposed to dislike Doug. Let's talk about how, according to Sarah, Lindsay Ellis made good faith criticism while nostalgia critics were in bad faith. And look, I'm not going to compare the quality of the two, but for over a half a decade, Lindsay Ellis was the nostalgia chick, essentially playing into Doug's brand. Now, ironically, Sarah Z's brand is essentially tied to Lindsay Ellis's in much the same way Lindsay's was attached to Doug's. Obviously, don't bite the hand of someone you're a derivative of, but come on. Even bringing up how Nostalgia Chick was good while Doug was bad is a really weak way to strengthen an argument against him. Their brand of reviewing was essentially the same. The characters were different, and I'm not going to argue which had better quality or which were better critics because frankly that's irrelevant to my argument. But, come on, how could she have edited this and not noticed the clear irony? Now, this isn't to take away from Lindsay. In fact, I quite like her content now, mostly, although a good portion of her videos aren't really my cup of tea. She definitely has evolved beyond Doug's brand and even makes pretty good videos these days. She does defend this point by saying Lindsay's videos aren't at the same analytical level as today, but that doesn't really excuse the point that apparently Nostalgia Chick is in good faith, while Nostalgia Critic isn't. In conclusion, angry video game nerd curates stuff he isn't going to like because that is his character, and that's fine because it's not like he's buying the newest game and finding stuff to hate. He finds old games he hates and tells us why. This is a review in good faith, at least in my eyes. Nostalgia Critic also curates stuff he dislikes and talks about why he dislikes it. That is his brand. And when he does resort to watching new things, he pokes fun at them, but he still gives his genuine opinion. So in my opinion, Nostalgia Critic's content is in good faith as well.
This is a theme that's consistent throughout this video and many others.
Sarah
Clearly hates
Nostalgia Critic,
calling her a
bad faith critic,
and a thoroughly loathsome person, among other things. And because of
Sarah
personal dislike for
Nostalgia Critic,
she's turned to ascribing
opinions
that
Nostalgia Critic
didn't even
have
as like proof of
his
detestability.